Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. Do we need a better intro, Bill? Maybe we'll have a song at some point. Should I growl more or something? You think a song will do it?
A song will do it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. We don't need you growling.
Okay. I'll be not doing whatever. Just want the show to be a hit. So, but I like getting right to the point, which is over under win totals in the North, which is the episode today. And FanDuel has put out win totals for the power conference teams. I didn't find Notre Dame. Did you find Notre Dame anywhere?
Did not find Notre Dame. I thought they would have been listed under the ACC, and they weren't. And then I searched for them in Google individually, and nothing came up. So I don't have anything on Notre Dame.
So we apologize to our Notre Dame watchers and listeners, but we have the over-under win totals for the 25 other teams in the North. As you guys know, there are 26 power conference teams in the North that we claim here at the moment on Kings of the North. That may expand before we expand to 5 days a week in July. And Bill and I went through and we picked our 5 favorites. So we're going to talk a little bit about what all of them are so you know them and you can start thinking about them. This is not a gambling show. We may get to a gambling episode in the fall, but we're not talking about hey, this win total is minus 140 or whatever. It's just we're trying to let you know what the odds makers think about how many games your team should win this year. Bill, is that okay? Or would you rather make it a hardcore, down and dirty gambling show? Oh, I'm going to wait till this gets to minus 130 before I hit it.
No, we do an Ohio State gambling show during the season, and I was awful this year, so I don't need to do another gambling show. Let's just talk about the teams and the context of what these win totals mean, not the financial implications.
Just ball, just talking ball.
Just ball.
So we have the teams by win totals overall in the North. And so we will start with the teams with the highest win totals. Again, this is, all right, we set it right in the middle. You want to bet more than these wins, less than these wins, 10.5 wins. Oh, by the way, this is a 12-game regular season. So this is not including any kind of postseason stuff. So this is in a 12-game regular season. 10.5 wins, Ohio State and Oregon. Does it make sense to you, Bill, that those are the two teams with the highest win totals in the North?
Yes. Yeah, it does. And that's that's typically as high as they go, right? You never see an 11.5 typically with these. I
think I saw 11s last year. Georgia might have been in an 11 last year, where if they where you're getting a push on 11-1, and that to win they have to go undefeated, right?
Yeah.
I did think, but 10.5 is super high. To your
10.5, yeah, 10.5 is very high. And if you look at the schedule for both of these teams, I think there's enough there to pull you back from putting it at an 11.
And you know what's very difficult? They play each other.
Yes.
So one of them is guaranteed a loss, which means to hit the over, they have to win every other game. Mm-hmm. So that is part of this too. There's something at the end here that I want to talk about where you try to think about over under win totals together as it relates to dog mentality in the South. But 9.5 wins, Michigan, Penn State, Utah. We both like Utah to win the Big 12 at this point in the season. We know Michigan and Penn State have played at the top of the Big 10 recently. Does this make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I thought maybe because the 9.5 has been out there for Michigan for a while, basically since the season ended. And I thought maybe you might see some movement there, perhaps to a 9 or an 8.5. But no, I think this mostly makes sense. Even with what Michigan's losing, to say, do you think they're going to go 10-2 or not? I think is reasonable. And respect for Penn State too, that maybe I wasn't necessarily expecting, but that's typically I think where Penn State is most years is around 9.5.
And listen, schedules matter so much in this. So yes, we know that Michigan went 15-0 and won the national title. They also play Texas, USC, Ohio State, right? Schedules matter. Mm-hmm. Michigan has a tough schedule. Nobody at 8.5. So there's there's a hole in the graphic. There is nobody. So there's a clear top 5 in the North in terms of expectations and wins. 7.5. Iowa State, Maryland, Washington, Nebraska. Here we have one of the teams in the national title game, the Washington Huskies, down at 7.5. It is really hard to get a handle on Washington right now. And that's just with changeover in coaching staff, losing so many good players. They have 1 million guys going to the combine. And by the way, they're joining a new conference. I think it's impossible to figure out right at the moment what Washington's going to be.
Yeah, I agree with that. But it is interesting to me that if you look at returning production, Michigan and Washington are basically the same. Both of them have new coaching staffs. And that Michigan is 2 wins higher than Washington. I do find, and they're in the same conference. I do find a little interesting, but Washington is difficult to get a handle on. And if you think of this like in terms of tiers, I am a little surprised, and I don't think I necessarily agree with like Iowa and Iowa State being on the same tier as Maryland, Washington, and Nebraska. I would probably, if I could make an 8.5, I would probably put Iowa and Iowa State there, if only to separate them in terms of tiers.
And it is interesting for Washington. Like, hey, welcome to the Big Ten. It's like, oh, cool. Like, yeah, who's in our group? Like, you're coming to like the convention, right? And everybody has name tags on, and you've been assigned different groups. And Washington's like, hey, everybody, yep, that was us. Yes, that was us in the national title game. Hey, Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, Penn State. Cool. We're with you guys, right? And then they're like, oh, no, sorry. You're with the Maryland, Nebraska, Iowa group. And Washington's like, what are you talking about? They look down at their name tag, and their name tag like is in orange, and like, oh, Iowa's in orange too. So a little shock to the system maybe for the Huskies. All right, 6.5. Syracuse, Rutgers, Wisconsin, West Virginia. We have some thoughts on some of those teams. Again, like where Luke Fickell's trying to take Wisconsin. Wisconsin wants to be in the Iowa, Nebraska kind of group, right? So that 6.5 for Wisconsin might be a chance to hit it over, but like that's not where the Badgers want to be.
No, that is a little jarring to see Wisconsin with the 6.5 next to its name, and not a whole lot of respect for Luke Fickell.
Yeah. 5.5. Pitt, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan State, Colorado, Northwestern, and Cincinnati. Northwestern had a pretty good year last year. They have a decent amount back there. That's a win total that's projecting them to have a losing record potentially. Colorado's interesting to take a peek at there. Michigan State in year one of Jonathan Smith. And then down at the bottom, 4.5, BYU, Purdue, Minnesota, Boston College. So is there anybody at the bottom, Landis? It's like Minnesota's a little weird for me. I think BYU and Purdue, Ryan Walters in year 2, I think there's certainly a possibility for a jump up there. But I do think maybe like Minnesota sort of in the last tier, the bottom tier of the North feels like maybe they're historically a little better than that.
Yeah, and that would be a like consistent downturn for PJ Fleck from 9 wins to 6 wins to like, even if they're over this win total to 5 wins. Like I don't know that I necessarily think of Minnesota in those terms. It's a little weird to see them at the bottom.
Yeah. Okay, let's get into then our favorite over and under picks right now. We each picked 5, and then we each did a bonus one from the South. So we will do the ones at the South last. Stick around for that. We're not all taking Georgia over 10.5, all right? That's not what we're going to do on this show.
No.
So, like, if you're looking for, like, oh, man, I got to tell you, Bill Landis loves South Carolina this year. He is so on South Carolina over 6.5. That's not what this show's about. That's not what the show's ever going to be about. But we have a little South talk at the end. Let's start with the North, though. Your first one on the bat, Michigan State over 5.5 wins. Why do you like the Spartans here?
Yeah, I feel like Michigan State is, and I understand why, they're being a little underrated just because they haven't been very good for a number of years now. But I don't think that cupboard is bare there with Jonathan Smith taking over. And we've talked about how much we love the addition of Aiden Childs, at quarterback. And I just think they're going to be probably like significantly better than people are expecting them to be. I'm not saying they're going to, compete for the Big Ten title necessarily in Jonathan Smith's first year. They have a lot of ground to make up before they're doing that. But I do think their baseline level of competency is going to rise significantly in the first year because they're just going to be a well-coached team. And I think the schedule sets up okay for them to attack a 5.5 and end up with 6 wins, possibly get to a bowl game. Like the way I broke it down is like, where do I think they're going to get wins?
Yeah. And
then how many more do I need after that? Right. So I'm looking at Florida Atlantic, at Maryland.
Tom Herman has something to say about that. Tom Herman.
Yeah.
Watch out.
Yeah. I know. Sorry, Tom. They got Prairie View A&M on there. They got Boston College, and they have Purdue. Like I have that as 5 wins, and even if you want to say that's 4 wins, like whatever, I'll say that's 4 wins. That you only need 1 or 2 more wins, and they play Ohio State, and they play Oregon, and they play Michigan, but they also play Indiana, Illinois, and Rutgers, and they play Iowa. So like I just think there's a lot of winnable games for Michigan State on the schedule, and this feels low to me. Like I think that they can be a bowl team this year, and if you're going to tell me that the over under is 5.5, like I'm gonna take that and say that Michigan State gets at least 6 wins this year.
No, I think this is a good one. I think this is one of these situations where can Aiden Childs at quarterback win Michigan State, like at least one game kind of that you're not expecting, or pull one out. I think that's certainly possible. And one of the things that, I mean, and if you're going to do this exercise, you're going through the schedule, right? You have to pull the schedule up and go through exactly what you did. With no more divisions and no more of like, okay, well, if you're talking about Rutgers, Rutgers has to play Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan State. What does that mean? Like, that's gone. But there still are some things where it's like, I think it makes it, there might be an opportunity here in February if you really dive in on some things. I think so. Is anyone from Vegas watching this show? Nobody's watching from Vegas. People say this stuff all the time. Listen, I think there's a chance to get a leg up on Vegas. Because I don't know, like, I just, is it an algorithm? Is it a guy named Steve in a back room? I don't know if there are still some assumptions about schedules and things. I feel like there were some teams that I went through, Bill, where it's like, okay, here's a West team, an old Big Ten West team that maybe used to have it pretty easy, but now they're not playing all the West teams anymore. What does that mean? Or here's an East team that used to always have to play Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State, and now they're not anymore. What does that mean? How are Oregon and Washington and USC and UCLA fitting into these new schedules? There's a lot of changeover just within who you're playing and how that affects expectations that I think if you are a huge Big Ten fan and you really dig in, I think you might have a chance to find some over-unders here that you really like.
No, I agree with that 100%. And I was looking at some of that with some of my picks. And like Michigan State, for example, it does play Ohio State and Michigan, but it doesn't play Penn State. Now, you substitute a trip to Oregon instead of playing Penn State. But like you think about like scheduled losses in the Big Ten, right? It's Ohio State. It's for a lot of the Big Ten anyway. It's Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Oregon, probably Washington and USC. Like Michigan State only has 3 of those teams on its roster, and like for a 5.5, you can take losses in all 3 of those games and still be pretty comfortable. So, and you said like Aiden Childs might win them a game they're not supposed to, and I don't even know if they have to do that to get to 6 wins. If you're going to give me Florida Atlantic, Maryland, Prairie View A&M, Boston College, and Purdue, and then I got to get one more against Indiana, Illinois, and Rutgers. Like I don't think that's Michigan State playing outside of itself and stealing a game. I think that's Michigan State being Michigan State. Like I if this was at 6.5, I still might take it. Like this feels like just off the mark to me at 5.5 at Michigan State.
Okay, I like it. I agree with it. I didn't pick it, but I like it. We do have a couple that we do agree on later on. But I will go to my first one, which is Syracuse over 6.5 wins. Syracuse in 2023 started 4-0 and finished 6-6. Syracuse in 2022 started 6-0 and finished 7-5. So part of this is with new coach Fran Brown taking over for Dino Babers. Don't collapse. And that's a good start. But this is also one of those where you're going through, they get both of the new California ACC teams. You guys all remember that Cal, Stanford, and SMU are in the ACC now, right? It's Cal, and this is one of those, right? Again, it's nuts. The sport is nuts right now. But Washington and Rutgers being in the same conference is not the craziest thing. Boston College and Cal are in the same conference, right? Stanford and Pitt are in the same conference. SMU and Syracuse are in the same conference. So those California schools are not a good spot, I don't think. Like, I don't know that Cal and Stanford are going to come take the ACC by storm. So Syracuse gets both of them. They get Boston College, which we're not super high on right now. Holy Cross feels like a free win. They do open with Ohio. I think they have, and then like the ACC is going to be weird. Like they get UConn. So I went through, I have like 6 wins for them that I feel really good about, which is Ohio, Stanford, Holy Cross, Boston College, Cal, and UConn. And then to get the over, they have to beat one of Miami, Virginia Tech, Pitt, North Carolina State, UNLV, and Georgia Tech. Like they don't play Clemson. They don't play Florida State. They don't play Drake May. You know what I mean? Like I know Drake May. Like they don't really play almost anybody scary. And they have an experienced quarterback in Kyle McCord that I think will just like he's been through it. Kyle McCord led a game-winning drive against Notre Dame last year. Like Kyle McCord's been through it. And with what Fran Brown is injecting into the program, I think schedule, quarterback, energy of a new coach, I think there's a lot of opportunity here. And I don't think the ACC is going to be very good this year. So I feel good about over 6.5.
Yeah, I would too. I looked at this one pretty closely. Part of the reason why I didn't take it is I thought you might, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to have us pick all the same 5. Even though, as you said, we do have some overlap. Some of the road games worried me a little bit as I was looking at it. Like even at UNLV, feels like potentially a little tricky. At NC State, which I like, the ACC is not very good, but I think NC State is probably one of the better teams there. At Pitt, Pitt could be a solid team. I don't think Cal's very good, but going all the way out to Berkeley to play is a trip for Syracuse, and then they play Miami at the end of the year, who I don't think is very good, but I think some people think might have a chance at actually winning the ACC this year. So there was enough there for me to be okay staying away from it. But I agree with what you're laying out here with kind of the pathway to getting to 7 wins. It does feel rather likely.
Yeah, I really like. I think a 3-1 or 4-0 start is definitely there for the taking, and then it's just kind of like win some of the toss-up games. Again, that Virginia Tech, right? You don't have to beat Virginia Tech, but like that's okay. They can.
Virginia Tech's a good team.
Yeah. So I do think probably for this, they're probably going to have to beat at least 1 or 2 decent teams, right? They don't get here only on schedule, but they can get 5 wins, I think. Basically only on schedule and then see what happens. All right. This is a big one for you. This is an under, and it's the national champion Michigan Wolverines under 9.5 wins. Why?
It's just a really hard schedule, man. Like I'm the certainty that Michigan's going to get to 10. I just I don't necessarily feel it. I think you get, bowl eligible if you're Michigan rather easily with what's on this schedule. But the way I basically thought about it is, do I think Michigan is going to get 3 wins in its 5 games against Texas, USC, Washington, Oregon, and Ohio State? And right now, my answer to that is no. I don't love the game against Texas earlier in the year. I think Texas is more complete than Michigan is. You will see about USC. Like I think USC is probably better this year, or at least more balanced this year than it was last year, and potentially like pretty good on defense with some of the changes they've made. You can tell me Michigan's going to win out Washington. I might buy that, but then Oregon and Ohio State, I don't think are gimmies. So there just wasn't enough of that on here. There weren't enough gimmies on Michigan's schedule for me to think like, yes, they're definitely going to get to 10 wins. As I said earlier, I was actually a little surprised that it was still at 9.5, given all the offseason changes at Michigan. They didn't lose any players. I still think their defense is going to be really good, but there's enough change on the coaching staff. There's basically a brand new offense we're going to see from Michigan this year, and the schedule is really difficult. So at the moment, I'm not loving the idea of a 10-2 Michigan.
Yeah, is it not true that Texas, Oregon, and Ohio State might be 3 of the 5 best teams in the country?
Yeah, I think so.
And Michigan plays them all. It is insane. The difference between Michigan's schedule last year and Michigan's schedule this year.
No.
Michigan's schedule this year is ridiculous. And I think one of the points here is that Michigan could be a very good playoff team and be 9-3.
9-3.
And be under. Because with that schedule, if you're looking at Michigan and you're like, well, they beat Washington, they beat Fresno State, who's actually pretty good. Their 3 losses are to Ohio State, Texas, and Oregon, who are the 1, 3, and 5 seeds.
Yeah.
In the playoff. And Michigan's at 9-3. It's like Michigan's like it's a home game. Michigan's like the 8 seed in the playoff at 9-3. And they are good and respected, and you cash your ticket.
Yeah, I can absolutely see that playing out. When we did our playoff projections, I still had Michigan in the playoff. Now I feel a little differently about Michigan now than I did when we did that exercise a couple weeks ago. But I think you're absolutely right. They can go 9-3 with this schedule and make the playoff. I don't know about maybe getting a home game, maybe not a home game, but potentially. I don't know. It'll be an interesting I guess, thought exercise for the playoff committee if it does end up playing out that way, because we've never been in the situation before where you get to analyze a schedule like that, and you get to analyze like good losses in a way that's like actually meaningful. So as long as those losses aren't blowouts and they look competitive, then I think that there is a path for Michigan to get to the playoff, and also a path for me to be right about this win total.
Yeah. It just so people, like, it's not incongruous that you have Michigan in the playoff and under this, because like they could be the third best team in the Big Ten, but they played Ohio State and Oregon and lost to them, who were the two best teams. And then, by the way, they played a banger of a non-conference game against Texas, and here you are. And that's why the committee's there. That's not why it's just records, right? Like, that's like, you have to be able, because they're going to still, in that world, they still have the opportunity to pick up solid wins over Michigan State and Washington and USC. And again, we've talked about it a couple times here, like Fresno State has a chance to be one of the best group of 5 teams, and that's the opener for Michigan. So like, they have a chance to have good wins and still have 3 losses. So if you're a Michigan fan, are you psyched for this schedule and this season? Or are you like, oh my God, what have they done to us?
I mean, you get to have Texas, USC, and Oregon come to the Big House. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
If you're a season ticket holder, I would be pretty excited about that. Just generally, maybe not.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a slog for sure. Because like you said, like the way they're playing the two best teams in the Big Ten aside from themselves, they're playing the second best team in the country outside of the Big Ten in Texas, I think. And they are playing perhaps the best group of 5 team in the country in Fresno State.
Yeah. Congrats.
That's all. That's all. Yeah.
Thanks, Jim. Did Jim make that schedule? Jim's like, hey.
That's why he left. Yeah.
For real. Nick Saban was like, hey, we're going north. I mean, not we. You guys are going north for the next decade without me. And Jim was like, oh, man, 2024 is going to be so fun. Have a good time. I'll be watching from Southern California. All right. So that is a super interesting. It's going to be super fun to talk about Michigan football and the revamp, the continuation of this, and it's going to be put to the test a gazillion times with this kind of schedule. All right. I'm taking another big time program, and I'm going over, though, because I'm just an optimistic person. Nebraska over 7.5. I'm going to guess you also looked at this.
I did. Yeah.
Okay. Matt Rule in year 2 at Stops, and he's going to be in year 2 at Nebraska. At Temple, they were 2-10 in year 1 and 6-6 in year 2. 4-game increase in wins. At Baylor, they were 1-11 in year 1. They were 7-6 in year 2. 6-game increase in wins. Last year, Nebraska was 5-7. They have to get to 8 wins to hit this over. They need a 3-game increase in wins. So he's done 4-game and 6-game increases in his career. This is a lot of schedule-driven stuff because, like, they have Ohio State, but they skated past a lot of other stuff. They don't have Michigan. They don't have Oregon. And they don't have Washington. So Nebraska does play at USC and at Ohio State. They get Wisconsin at home, but like, there are winnable games here. So like, when UTEP, Colorado, Northern Iowa, into their bye, their first 6 games, UTEP, Colorado, Northern Iowa, Illinois, at Purdue, Rutgers. 5 of the first 6 at home. I think they could start 6-0.
So do I. Yeah. And I think they could be 7-0 after their bye week playing at Indiana.
Yeah. So they could be 7-0 going into Ohio State. And I don't think anybody would expect them to win that game at Ohio State, but now they're 7-1 and they need to get one more win. UCLA at USC, Wisconsin at Iowa. So like, those are competitive games. We don't know how good UCLA is going to be this year. Actually, UCLA might be in a rebuild year with Deshaun Foster as the first year head coach, inheriting what Chip Kelly left him. So, I mean, like, 3 of their 4 toughest games are their last 3. USC, Wisconsin, Iowa, but they might be at their over before they get to there. So I just think the combination of Rule in year 2, the schedule, the thing that would hold you back is they're almost certainly going to be playing a true freshman quarterback in Dylan Raiola. Did that hold you back?
Yeah, it just made that last group of games like not feel like there was a slam dunk win in there. And maybe it is UCLA. They catch UCLA in a weird spot. So I'm just looking at UCLA's schedule. They play at Rutgers and then they have a bye and then they come back and they got to go play at Nebraska. Like that's a lot of travel in a 3-week period for UCLA. So maybe that's probably to Nebraska's favor, and the game is in Lincoln, which certainly is to Nebraska's favor. So maybe that's it, because I really do I like a 7-0 start there. Maybe it's 6-1. And then you got to get 2 out of that last group. I don't feel great about that. But if you're going to tell me they're going to start 7-0, which I understand people who aren't Nebraska fans might hear that and think that we sound crazy. But like honestly, go look at the schedule and tell us what you think. And then they got to get one more against UCLA, or like Wisconsin at home. I think is a winnable game for Nebraska. And like the Iowa game's like kind of a close game, no matter what. Right? It's in Iowa City, so I'm not necessarily writing off that game for Nebraska. So I like it. I definitely did look at it. The kind of cluster of games there on the back of the schedule combined with true freshman quarterback was enough for me to stay away, but I definitely see value in it.
The thing that would make me nervous is because it's one of those, right? Like by the time they get to the tougher games, Dylan Raiola will have 7-8 games under his belt and will be more prepared for it. But if they chunk the Illinois game because Dylan Raiola throws 3 picks or something, just like the things that freshman quarterbacks do, right? Like that makes it tough then. That like the very winnable games early on, if they stub their toe twice because they're kind of learning and growing and building towards something much bigger a year or 2 from now, if they get to the Ohio State game and they're 4-3, it's over. You've lost. You're like, so. That's right. It's like, just run the table in November. That's not going to happen. But still, I felt pretty good about it because do you think like year 2 Matt Rule is a thing?
I do. Yeah. Okay. I think so.
Okay. Again, and just no Michigan, no Oregon, no Washington, no Penn State. Like we're going to have to get used to this in the Big Ten when the conference is this large. And there is such a pretty clear, at the moment at least, top tier. Like when you are avoiding most of that top tier, this is just going to be one of those things where it's going to be so influential. And like is this a bit strong? If you want to take a flyer and like pick Nebraska to make the Big Ten championship game, I think there's a way you could talk yourself into that based on the schedule. Because as we just said, is Nebraska better? Do you think Nebraska in 2024 will be better than Michigan?
No.
I don't either. Do you think Nebraska could finish with a better record than Michigan?
Yeah, because Michigan's schedule's a bear. Yeah.
Right. So like that idea, right? I mean, if Nebraska was playing Oregon and all the teams that we laid out for Michigan, like again, it's just if they're playing Texas in the non-conference instead of Colorado in the non-conference, just a different animal. So schedules really matter here. But I do like this. I feel pretty good about this, but I also have the understanding of the freshman quarterback could trip me up pretty quickly here. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to start hugging because we agree on a couple things. We'll do that next on Kings of the North. Talking win totals here on Kings of the North. News out this morning that the EA Sports college football video game is definitely coming back, Bill, which is exciting. People enjoy video games, I feel like. So they have put on their Twitter account, coming this summer, full reveal in May. And we are lucky enough to have one of the preeminent experts on the EA Sports college football video game as part of our company now, in Matt Brown. So expect a show on Kings of the North next week where we dig into this even more, because it is one of these things where this is a great, people connect to sports through video games. And if we're going to live in a world now where you can like actually play with real dudes and the players can get some money for it, like is this not the whole point? This is why everybody got sued, right? Mm-hmm. It was like, hey, right? Wasn't Ed O'Bannon was like, hey, you put me in a video game, where's my money? And then college sports exploded.
Yeah, and the video game went away, which was the most devastating part of all of it. I'm so happy that it's coming back. I've grew up with the game. I honestly, that game is Philadelphia is not a college football hotbed necessarily. It's more of a pro sports town. That game was like my entree into college football fandom, more so than like sitting on the floor of my living room every Saturday watching games. It was like playing first it was Bill Walsh college football, and then it became EA Sports college football. But yeah, I'm stoked for it.
I'm just little Philly Billy running wide zone in his basement brings a tear to my eye, man.
Oh yeah, it's great.
Did you run the triple option?
Yeah, I played with the service academies a lot, and then if I wasn't playing with them, I would just change my offense to triple option. Yeah.
Yeah. How did I know that? So yeah, so we'll talk about it. I mean, because again, Matt Brown from the Extra Points newsletter, he's just like all over this stuff. So we'll dig in more on like how this came to be and what it means, and then we'll go back and we'll recreate Philly Billy in his Philly basement. But for now, we're sticking with win totals from the North, and the first one that we are united on, Bill, is Maryland under 7.5 wins, and I think we're so united on this. I have no idea why this is this high.
It's a little weird, right? Like I will say that the Big Ten's very nice. The thing that the Big Ten did do for both Maryland and Rutgers after years of getting their heads beaten in the Big Ten East is not make either of them play all three of Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan again. Rutgers doesn't play any of them. So they got the really sweet deal there. But Maryland only has to play Penn State. Maryland does not play Ohio State. Maryland does not play Michigan. But Maryland still has to play at Oregon. And it has to play even like at Virginia. Like, is that a gimme for Maryland? I'm not entirely sure. They still play USC. Like, I just have a hard time finding 8 wins here for Maryland. And no offense to Mike Loxley, who I think's done a pretty good job there. They have won 8 games each of the last 2 years. So they're capable of getting there, but I'm just not so sure it's going to happen against this schedule.
So like what happened? This is one of the examples I'm talking about. So Maryland plays 4 of their traditional Big Ten East foes: Michigan State, Indiana, Rutgers, and Penn State. And then the 2 they miss, as you said, are Michigan and Ohio State. But all they did is swap out Michigan and Ohio State for Oregon and USC. Like, is that easier? And then their 3 West teams are Northwestern, Minnesota, and Iowa. So like, to me, like it's like this is one of the things like, oh, the burden being lifted off the East teams. You don't have to play these teams. But Oregon and USC, like it's the same thing to me. It's the same level of challenge. And it's the same, like, I'm certainly not expecting Maryland to win either of those games, no matter how good they are. Yeah. So it's still like 2 sure losses. And do you know the last time Maryland won 8 regular season games, which is what they would have to win to hit this over?
I don't, because they got into 8 total the last 2 years, and that's with a bowl win.
Yeah.
I don't know the last time Maryland's won 8 regular season games.
2010. Never in the Big Ten. They've never done it when they've been good. And like, Maryland has been good. This is not an indictment of Maryland's program. This is a realistic assessment of where Maryland stands in the Big Ten pecking order. And yes, they don't have to play Michigan and Ohio State, but they do have to play Oregon and USC. And like, if you think they're going to lose to Penn State, Oregon, and USC, then they can only lose 1 more game to hit you over. And they have like a lot of losable games. Like, they could lose to Northwestern. They could lose to Iowa. They could lose to Rutgers. They could lose to Minnesota. They could lose to Virginia. They could lose to Michigan State. And they might be pretty good. They might have a successful season and have their fans be very happy and have Mike Loxley pumping his arms in the air and be 6-6 or 7-5. I think 8-4 is practically a miracle for Maryland.
I think it would be. I went through all of my picks and wrote down, like I said, the games I think they're definitely going to win. For Maryland, I have 2. UConn and Villanova.
Yeah. So, and this is, and again, like, Talia Tonga has been such a safety blanket for Maryland for the past like half decade. He's such a constant, and they've run some pretty good receivers through there. They have they'll have good skill players, you know, like Anthony McFadden or whatever. Like, they don't have skill. The handoff, the running backs you believe in. I think MJ Morris, as we've talked about on our quarterback show, a transfer from North Carolina State, is a great get for Maryland, but it might take. He only started like 4 games at North Carolina State last year. He's not one of these North Carolina State. He's not one of these guys who has 2 years of experience as a starter. Right. And so like that adjustment might be something. And I think part of it is if the number was like, you look at it and say, hey, they're not playing Ohio State, Michigan. Take a breath, pump up their win total. I think that's wrong because USC and Oregon are the Western version of Ohio State, Michigan.
Yeah. And I looked at I looked at schedules, obviously. I also looked at returning production.
Okay.
And Maryland is 110th And Maryland is not the kind of program that just like absorbs that and pushes forward like an Ohio State, or that is routinely ranked in the 100s year after year. Like being ranked 110th for Maryland to me feels like a little bit of a reset for them. So like you're going to tell me that and they're going to get the 8 wins, like I'm not really buying it.
Yeah, this might be my closest thing to a sure thing. This is
If we're assigning confidence points, I'm putting a lot on this one for sure.
And again, that's not even saying Maryland's going to be bad. It's just that I think there's a way that Maryland can be very competitive and happy with its season, but that's still like a 6-6 year that gets them to a bowl. Right. So like 8-4 with the reality of this situation for Maryland is like a historically good season for Maryland. We agree on another one, and we're putting our money where our mouth has been, especially for me, because I have this team in the playoff. It's West Virginia over 6.5 wins. Why do you like this?
Because I kind of think they're going to win the Big 12, and you're talking me into it. So
welcome aboard.
If I think that, then I certainly have to be over 6.5 wins. I thought looking at their schedule, I can get this 6 without a whole lot of mental gymnastics, and then I got to win one more from like a tough slate. That's again like it's Penn State, it's Kansas, it's at Oklahoma State, it's Iowa State at home, it's Kansas State at home, and it's at Arizona. And I think the Big 12 is going to be like a really fun, really competitive conference at the top. But the fact that West Virginia, like among its tougher games and among the best teams it's going to face in the Big 12, gets them all at home in Kansas, Iowa State, and Kansas State, like that was enough for me to think that they'll get the one more win they need to at least hit this over. But I actually think this is a team, as you said, that can be flirting with a playoff bid and be well over 6.5.
All right. I completely agree with this, but I'm also going to throw a little water on it.
Okay.
They play 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams of their 12 that have over under win totals of 7.5 or better.
Oh, that's interesting.
So they play. There's like probably 6 teams that could win the Big 12, and they play basically all of them. So in the playing the game of like sure wins, like guaranteed wins for West Virginia, I only had 3, which is Albany, at Cincinnati, and Baylor at home. And then they play like a lot of toss-ups. So like, can they beat Penn State in the opener? I think they can, but like they're not going to be favored. They're probably better than Pitt, but it's at Pitt and it's the backyard brawl and like all bets are off, right? Mm-hmm. And then Kansas, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Kansas State, Arizona, UCF, they're all good. That's like kind of everybody else in the Big 12 that's good except for Utah. And so they have to win like more than half those games. Now, I mean, I'm talking about them as a playoff team. So what am I doing? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if they can beat Kansas. Like, if I'm thinking that, then what am I doing putting them in the playoff? But like, I also might be out over my skis on West Virginia, and they might be really competitive and play some pretty darn good teams and just not quite get there. But still, 6.5 feels low. I actually think 7-5 for West Virginia this year, with Garrett Green at quarterback and everything they have back and the opportunity presenting itself in the Big 12. I actually think 7-5 would be kind of disappointing for them, and it would still be over. But I think we do need to acknowledge, like, there's not a lot of gimmies. They're almost all winnable games, but there's not that many sure thing wins.
Yeah, I got the 6, as I said, because I think they're better than Pitt. But you make a good point. Like, it's a backyard brawl. It's at Pitt. Like, and I had them beating UCF at home. And I actually think at Texas Tech at the end of the year is rather tricky, but I had that down to it. That's probably being a little too bold, saying that's like a guaranteed win. And I do think like this, we're high on West Virginia. I think a lot of people are going to be high on West Virginia, and this win total feels low. But I think it's a reflection of just being in the Big 12. Because like if you look at the Big 12, I don't like how many teams are like objectively very bad. Like
right,
not very many. Like Arizona State's probably going to be pretty bad. Baylor, I don't think is particularly impressive. Cincinnati, but even like Cincinnati's not going to have like one win. You know what I mean? Right. Like there's not. Week to week in the Big 12, I think is going to be pretty difficult for just about everybody because there's like 8 programs in here that are like kind of the same. So
yeah,
I understand why this is at 6.5, but I wanted to kind of back up the good vibes we've been having for West Virginia by going over here.
No, I love it. I think West Virginia can go 10-2. Like if we get down to like, and I'm sure we will. No, we will. Before the season starts, we will run through an in-depth preview of every one of our 26 teams in some
Mhm.
form, and we will make record predictions. And I would guess that I'm going to predict that West Virginia is going to go 10-2 if I sat here right now. So for a win total of 6.5, that's a heavy over, but it's not going to be easy. But
No,
I
it's
like
going to be
this.
it's going to be like a 10-2 with like 7 of the wins are going to be one possession games.
Yeah, exactly. Which means, like, again, you're gearing up. If you're a West Virginia football fan watching and listening to this, or watching and listening to all the other great West Virginia podcasts, like, how fired up are you for this season, for the potential of this season? You know, but like, it's not going to be easy. They also could lose to Penn State and then go to Pitt in the backyard brawl and start 1-2, but doesn't mean the season's over either. So
Yeah.
but it's like there's like 9 awesome games on the schedule where legitimately, because I don't think like they would look Penn State at home and at Arizona, I think, are the 2 toughest games on their schedule. But
Yep.
you wouldn't look at either of those and think West Virginia can't win those games.
No, I don't. Yeah.
And then I think, honestly, outside of the Albany gimme in week 2, I don't know that you would guarantee, like, Baylor at home, okay, but like Baylor was on the cusp of the playoff like 3 years ago. It's not like Baylor's a horrible program, So I mean, like, it's gonna be a fun as heck schedule. Love it.
If we're making a list of like college towns that are going to be popping off the most this football season, and I go all in with Morgantown hosting Penn State, Kansas, Iowa State, and Kansas State, do you think you can find a better one?
Yeah, no, write that down for a show. Home schedule pop off. Like, yeah, who's like, and Ann Arbor is gonna be popping off too. Like
Oh yeah, Ann Arbor's popping off. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and Columbus is like,
it's wait till November.
Hosting Rutgers. Like, it is the Ohio State home schedule is redonkulously bad. All right, this is your last Northern one, and it is another under from pessimistic Philly Billy, and you're going under a low total with Boston College under 4.5. Why?
Yeah, I'm just not feeling it from this program. I think I'm perhaps being blinded by my distaste for the Bill O'Brien hire. I didn't love it.
Don't like it. You don't.
No, I don't love the Bill O'Brien hire. Like, and I also like I was on this before they hired Bill O'Brien. I probably would have taken the under no matter who they hired. So this is not necessarily a reflection of Bill O'Brien. When Jeff Hafley left to go to the Green Bay Packers, I went and looked at the schedule, and everyone was like, "Oh, Jeff Hafley's leaving because he's unhappy with the state of college football." I was like, "No, Jeff Hafley's leaving because Boston College is going to go 3-9 next year, and he's going to get fired." Okay. So that's mostly where this comes from. I don't see 5 wins on the schedule. I see 2, and even honestly, 2 feels like stretching it. Like, they're going to beat Duquesne, that I'm sure of. No, I'm sure of nothing else on the schedule. Western Kentucky, maybe. They play at Florida State. They play at Missouri. 2 tough road games early. They're going to lose.
Missouri in a non-conference. Wow.
Yeah. Michigan State, like, toss up to me. At Virginia, toss up. At Virginia Tech, toss up. Or at Virginia Tech's probably a loss. Louisville's a loss. I think Syracuse is a loss. I think at SMU is a loss. I think Carolina and Pitt are losses. Like, there's no way you can convince me that there's 5 wins for Boston College on the schedule.
And again, it's like, I don't even know that people would be mad. Like, I like, don't you think, wow, they play Missouri and Michigan State back to back in September as non-conference games? I love a good non-conference schedule, but wow, for Boston College, that is juicy. I don't even think like Boston College fans are coming off a bowl win, right? Like, that was a pretty nice, won the Fenway Bowl last year. Now Hafley leaves, but I think people at Boston College feel pretty good about the Bill O'Brien hire, right? You're getting a guy who was a former NFL head coach to be the head coach at Boston College, and then it's a total reset year. So like, this isn't even, I don't even think they're that mad about 2-10. They like think they're building to something, right? So you can cash your under ticket, and also, the Eagles are still okay.
I just don't understand, like, why is, like, and I don't want to talk out of both sides of my mouth because I'm with you. Like, I like the marquee non-conference games too. I wish everybody played them, but I don't like, why is Boston College scheduling like it's a MAC team? Like, what, they're playing Duquesne, Missouri, Michigan State, and Western Kentucky when they should be playing like Duquesne, Holy Cross, UConn, and UMass, and like give yourself 4 wins.
How is Boston College not in a thing where they play UNH, Rhode Island, and UMass, like two of those three teams every year? How do we not have a little New England round robin football thing up there?
Yeah, the Chowder round robin.
Oh, but we can sponsor that too, right? Talk to the boss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. My last one is an over because, again, as everybody knows, I am super optimistic. I mentioned it earlier. I was a little surprised by the number. It's Minnesota over 4.5. And I guess maybe sometimes, Bill, I get too caught up in history, but like Minnesota over 4.5, like PJ Fleck has never in a non-COVID year not won 5 regular season games at Minnesota. So like if you're predicting the worst season in the PJ Fleck era, 5-7, 6-6, 10-2, 8-4, 8-4, 5-7. And I don't know. Like, here are the games that I felt pretty decent about for them. Rhode Island, Nevada, UCLA, Maryland, winning one of Illinois or Rutgers. Like they do have to play Penn State. They do have to play USC. They played North Carolina in the opener, but I don't even know how good North Carolina is going to be this year. I don't.
Not as good as they were last year. Yeah,
that's a home game for Minnesota. I don't think that's like impossible. And again, Minnesota's bringing in a veteran quarterback in Max Brosmer from New Hampshire, who like knows how to play football. It might be a pretty good addition, and I think they believe they're elevating their quarterback play. I just don't know. Like, I don't know why this is this low, because I think PJ Fleck is a guy that is pretty capable of having a 500 team under a lot of different circumstances. And the schedule does not frighten me enough to think like, oh my gosh, this looks like 4-8 to me.
Yeah, no, I think PJ Fleck's like a high floor coach, right? Like,
yes, that's a way to say
he's had 2 in non-COVID years, as you said. He's had 2 other losing records in the regular season, which was when he went 1-11 in his first year at Western Michigan and 5-7 in his first year at Minnesota. And every year that wasn't the COVID year was 7 wins, 11, 9, 9, 6, including some bowl game wins in there. But like he's like comfortably over this number.
Yeah,
like almost all the time. So like I'm with you. It's low. I feel like it's a little bit of a misread on a Minnesota team. The other piece with Minnesota, as I mentioned, I was looking at returning production stuff. Minnesota is 19th in the country in returning production this year.
No Ohio State, no Oregon, no Michigan. No, they do play Michigan. Is that right? I guess they do play Michigan.
They do play at Michigan in September.
Yeah, so that's a loss. But still, like I don't know. I think it's okay. Like I think there's a path to this, and it would. I mean, again, it's one of the things combined. It's like when you look at, for instance, Minnesota playing Maryland, Illinois, Rutgers, and Wisconsin, right? When you look at that, what do you see? Do you see 0-4? I don't. I see very possibly 2-2 in that circumstance. And if they do that, I think they'll hit this over. So I actually feel pretty good about this one. This is not in order of like feeling best to feeling worst. I feel pretty confident about this one too. And I think PJ Fleck as a high floor coach is a very astute observation by you. Last break. When we come back, we're going to dip into the South briefly. And guess what? We got 2 wonders. We got 2 wonders for gigantic Southern programs. And I have a dog mentality point that I want to make, and we'll do that next on Kings of the North. Thanks, as always, to everybody who's making Kings of the North part of your week. Tell a friend, tell a podcast tell a radio station for wherever you are in the North. Hey, Kings of the North, maybe we'll come on any radio station, any podcast in the North that talks about one of our 26 Northern teams. Help us spread the word of Kings of the North. There's a lot more happening here. We're dipping into the South briefly, and we may as well talk about these together. You have Alabama under 9.5 wins, and I have LSU under 9.5 wins. So let me make a point here first, and then we'll get into specifics of this. By these, and all these numbers, by the way, are courtesy of FanDuel on your little betting app on your phone. I guess you can find it on the computer too. These are their numbers. In the new enlarged SEC, there are 8 teams in the SEC, 8 of 16, that are projected to win 8.5 games or more by their over-under totals, right? So that's not. So at least 9 wins. Georgia and Texas their over-under totals are 10.5. Alabama, LSU, Missouri, and Ole Miss are at 9.5, and Tennessee and Texas A&M are at 8.5. Okay, so there's a little bit of math here because again, the best part of college football is rules and court hearings and math. The games that those 8 teams play against each other in the regular season guarantees them 11 losses because there are 11 games where they play each other.
Mm-hmm.
Their win totals, to hit the overs for all their win totals, they can only have 16 losses total. Okay. So you're guaranteed 11. And then you look at some of the other games that these teams are playing. Georgia plays a banger schedule this year. Georgia plays Clemson in its opener and also plays Alabama, Texas, Ole Miss, and Tennessee. Georgia's going 7-5. That's a whole separate show. So Georgia plays Clemson also. Bama plays at Wisconsin. LSU plays USC. Tennessee plays NC State, which is a sneaky important game. Texas plays at Michigan. Texas A&M plays Notre Dame. And then, by the way, I don't have Oklahoma in this group, but Oklahoma's number is 7.5, and Jackson Arnold as a sophomore is like a dark horse Heisman candidate. Oklahoma plays Alabama, LSU, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Missouri, and Texas. So, like, they can screw up seasons for all of those teams we just mentioned.
Yeah.
So this is This is like, I'm here on behalf of the new and improved SEC. That math no longer applies. Just because Ole Miss and Alabama play each other does not mean they both cannot win in the eyes of God. And that is how we describe whether you are a winner on an over-under win total. So do not be beholden to the numbers of man, but only to the new math in the new and improved SEC. Do they all think they're going 11-1? This is insane.
Of course they do. Yeah.
That's not how it's going to work, SEC. Now, first of all, respect. They have everybody banging heads, right? The schedules are crazy. Alabama, and we'll run through it because it's your thing. Alabama plays Wisconsin, Georgia, Tennessee, Missouri, LSU, and Oklahoma this year. Bama, 9.5. Bama's going to go 5-7.
That's exactly what I thought. Yep.
They're all playing each other. And then these non-conference games. Again, Georgia, Clemson, Bama, Wisconsin, LSU, USC, Tennessee, NC State, Texas, Michigan, and Texas A&M, Notre Dame. Banger, 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 banger. So absolute respect to the SEC for making great games this year. The only thing they didn't think of is you can't have 2 winners in those games.
The math. Yeah. Well, maybe when we get to the new college football with Greg Sankey leading the way, they'll find a way to get 2 SEC winners out of 1 game.
Bama under 9.5. How could you feel about this?
I feel unreasonably confident in it.
Yeah.
I counted, like you said, 7 losable games on this schedule. And like there's a bunch of turnover there that I think they can drop 3 of those games for sure. At Wisconsin, Georgia at home, at Tennessee, Missouri at home, at LSU, at Oklahoma, and then the Iron Bowl. Like, it feels like a toss-up because it is most years. It's close, even when it's not supposed to be. And like I have no idea what to make of Alabama with Nick Saban gone, and they lost a lot of guys. And like, what's that offense going to look like? There's just so many question marks about them that like we need to recalibrate a little bit on what Alabama could potentially be this year. And this number, I think, is not recalibrated enough. So I feel pretty good about like a 8-4 Alabama season.
How do you think Alabama fans will handle an 8-4 Alabama season?
Reasonably well. No, like terribly. What do you mean how they're going to handle it? They're going to tear down the statues out front of the stadium.
This was such a good time to start this show. Oh my God, It's so good. The North, not only is the North rising up, but the South is in flames. I love it. I had so many different unders that I wanted to take in the SEC, but I did settle on LSU for a couple reasons. First of all, trying to find 3 losses for them as an under at 9.5. They play USC in Vegas. It's so weird. LSU plays USC and UCLA. How weird is that?
That is weird.
Why is that happening? And then they also play Ole Miss at Texas A&M, Alabama, and Oklahoma. So that again, that's like 6 real games. Actually, UCLA might be bad. That's 5 real games. And then they lost their Heisman-winning quarterback, 2 receivers who are both going to go in the first round of the draft, their offensive coordinator who left for Notre Dame, and they fired their entire defensive staff from last year. So is LSU going to be good? LSU underachieved last year, I think, with some of the talent that it had. That again, I didn't vote for Jaden Daniels on the top 3 of my Heisman ballot because I didn't think LSU mattered last year. They didn't. They lost to Florida State. They lost to Ole Miss. Like they lost to Alabama. They lost every game that mattered. Congratulations on your huge stats. LSU didn't matter last year. LSU went under this last year with all of that. Now they've lost everything that made them good. The SEC is better. Their schedule is tough. Their offensive coordinator is gone. They might lose their opener to like angry Lincoln Riley. And you're expecting they have to go 10-2 for you to make money on an over? That's crazy to me.
Yeah. I hadn't thought of them asking you to believe that they're going to be better this year than they were last year.
I have no idea. Like they're in like panic mode down there. Everything that was good is gone. Everything that was bad got fired. Congratulations. Good luck with Garrett Nussmeier. I don't know, brother. So like this is, and like I like Tennessee, like Tennessee at 8.5. I think Tennessee has a chance to be good. I think Missouri with all that coming back, including a veteran quarterback, 9.5. A lot of over 9.5 for Missouri, I think is possible. Ole Miss, like a lot of people are excited about Ole Miss. You've just got to be careful down there with some of the established ones. And I even think like we didn't take Georgia under 10.5. I'd look at that. I'd look at it. Do you think Georgia could lose twice? In the Clemson, Bama. They're at Bama, at Texas, at Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Those 3 road games are crazy.
Twice is a hard sell, but I mean, I'd buy an 11-1 Georgia for sure. I don't know if I can get to 2. I didn't really look at that one. I actually didn't look at much else in the SEC. The other ones I were looking at were in the ACC.
Okay.
I looked at Florida State and Miami, both under 9.5 wins. One, because I just can't wrap my mind around Miami winning 10 games. And I think Florida State might take a little bit of a step back, even in a year when the ACC is not particularly good. I thought those felt a little high. And then I liked Virginia Tech over, was it 7.5? I think it was. Yeah, over 7.5 wins. I actually think Virginia Tech's kind of a sneaky team in the ACC this year. And a border team.
So I do, and you've referenced this a couple times, and I meant to reference it more during the course of the show and didn't. I do think, like, it's Bill Connolly from ESPN who does the returning production stats, and I do think it's something that's really worth looking at this point in the season. For instance, my over on Syracuse, they're 10th in returning production. That's really good. If you like Rutgers is 8th in returning production. That can really matter. Penn State is 23rd. Nebraska, as you have mentioned a couple times, is 3rd in returning production. That was certainly part of my over on them. Utah, we like Utah in the Big 12. They're 16th in the nation in returning production. West Virginia is 24th. Iowa State is 2nd. Mm-hmm. I looked at a Colorado over for a little bit. If you really think Dion gets some stuff figured out on the offensive line with the play caller and that kind of thing, they're 15th in returning production. And I just want to make this note. A year ago at this time, when you looked at returning production, Florida State was number 1 in the country, which is why I picked Florida. It's not the only reason, but it's one of the big reasons I picked Florida State to win the national title. They went undefeated. They just didn't get let in the playoff. So like that worked. Michigan was 5th in returning production. That worked. Missouri was 9th in returning production going into last year. Missouri wins the Cotton Bowl, has an awesome year, as good of a year as Missouri's had in decades. Like that really worked. This is something, Bill, where I think historically, if you're using returning production as a reference point, it makes sense.
Yeah, I think there's pitfalls with it because returning production from teams that were bad, I think could be a little misleading, but it's especially informative when it's like when teams that recruit well or recruit reasonably well and like have a baseline level of talent that you think is like close to, if not at, the level you need to be at to compete for a championship, and then they're high, like that's when I like to really start to pay attention. Like even like an Oregon this year is 28th. Like 28th for a program like Oregon is really high, especially losing their quarterback. Like that is exceedingly high for a program that recruits really well and has a deep
Oregon
roster.
Lost its best receiver, its best running back, and its quarterback, and it's still 28th.
It's still 28th, yeah. So like that stuff jumps out at me. But I even think like teams like Iowa State and West Virginia and Utah, like teams that we think are building something and had encouraging signs last year and now are also high in returning production. I think that's worth taking a look at and keeping in mind too.
Okay. Bill, let's run through your picks if you want to ride with Philly Billy on the February over-unders. Let's recap it for everybody. What you got?
Yeah, Michigan State over 5.5, Michigan under 9.5, Maryland under 7.5, West Virginia over 6.5, Boston College under 4.5, and then the Southern play was Alabama under 9.5.
I just like looking at a graphic that has Boston College under and Alabama under right on top of each other.
It's nice.
The Bill O'Brien special. All right. My picks on my over-unders, I have Syracuse over 6.5, Nebraska over 7.5, Maryland under 7.5, rode with Landis on that, West Virginia over 6.5, rode with Landis on that, Minnesota over 4.5, and my Southern pick was LSU under 9.5. When we get rolling here on Kings of the North, we are going to have like a gambling component to it at times. We know there are some of you who like that. We know there are some of you that don't. This was a football discussion. I like using gambling numbers as reference points to have football discussions. But there will also be times where we break it off and we tell you, it's like, if gambling's not your thing, maybe don't watch this part. But if gambling is your thing, hey, we're going to dive in and we're going to make picks. We're going to track how we do. We're going to have, I think the plan is certainly to have some gambling experts come on and join us for that. So it's part of college football now, Bill. But we also understand that you don't want to like surprise people with it and have people think like, I don't care about this at all. Why are you forcing it on me?
Yeah, I think we understand that it's not for everybody, and like I totally get that, and we'll try to strike that balance between giving everybody kind of a piece of what they're looking for from college football discussion, and the gambling piece is part of it, but it's not going to dominate what we talk about. We want to make sure we're touching on it a little bit.
All right, that is our look at over under win totals. Got another batch of stuff planned for next week here on Kings of the North. Tell a friend. Tell a stranger, help get the word out. You can follow us on Instagram. You can follow us on Twitter. We're only growing and we're only planning, and we're excited and we're fired up, and we just are incredibly appreciative to everybody who is along for the ride so far. To our great producer, Mike Urostowski, thanks as always for making us look good and sound good. He's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.